Okay, let's continue.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Sokombela, before the lunch break, we had dealt with the concurrence of the AG to the appointment of PwC and Nkonki between 2011-12 and 2014-15. Can you explain to us what happened in 2015-2016? And I understand that this is when you were, in fact, responsible for it.
Absolutely, Chair. I think in 2015-16, when then the request for the Auditor General to concur was made, was then when I was involved. And
I'm sorry, just to make sure, because later on when one reads the transcript, it might not be clear. When you say in 2015-2016, you mean during the 2015-2016 financial year?
Absolutely, Chair.
Yeah, okay.
Absolutely, Chair. And also, that was the year when the board of South African Airways was requesting their concurrence to the Auditor General for the 2015-16 financial year. Yes, Chair. Chairperson, the request for concurrence was made, and I think on the 24th of July, 2015, where then the South African Airways was making then a request to appoint Nkonki Incorporation as the sole auditor of SAA for the 2015-16 financial year. And upon...
I'm sorry, that sounds strange to me. Maybe it's because I'm not an auditor. I would have thought that a request for concurrence would be directed to the Auditor General's office prior to the commencement of the 2015-2016 financial year, rather than in the middle of that financial year. But maybe it's because I'm not an auditor and I don't know that the actual performance of the auditor's job comes to us at the tail end of the financial year.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Yes, I think just to clarify, Chair, that the requirement before the start of the financial year is when the Auditor General make a decision whether he's opting in or is opting out. However, there is no requirement in terms of then the timing of the consultation then that needs to be done, because in as much as in July 2015, the 2015-16 financial year has already started. However, normally the audits, they start later on when the transactions have already happened, because as external auditors, we are auditing history, you know.
Yeah.
No. Yes.
Thank you.
Yes, Chair.
So the request was on time?
Absolutely, Chair.
Yeah, okay.
Yes, was on time. So, Chair, what happened then, after we received then that request for the appointment of Nkonki as the sole auditors, we evaluated the request, and what we then requested further from SAA was then for SAA to submit to us the audit committee resolution that was made recommending the appointment of SAA as the sole auditor to the board. And also the other information that you requested, Chair.
That is requesting the appointment of not SAA, isn't it? Of the auditing firm.
Nkonki,
yeah.
Nkonki.
I think you said SAA.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, Chair. So what we did, Chair, because upon evaluation of the request itself, there was more information that we're looking to gather so that we can determine whether then we can concur, we can recommend to the Auditor General to concur with the appointment or not.
And you, in particular, were now in charge of looking into this request?
Absolutely, Chair.
Yeah, okay.
Absolutely, Chair. So, Chair, what we did then, when I was doing that task, I was doing it with Mr. Nicholas Mukwena, who at the time was my manager. I was his line manager, so we were working together at the time. So What then Mr. Mukwena did was to request then this information from SAA, the Audit Committee resolution, that was made to the board to recommend the appointment of Nkonki as the sole auditor of SAA. The other information, Chair, that we were seeking is then the board resolution that was made, where then the board was recommending to the shareholder or the minister to say that SAA is appointing Nkonki as the external auditors. We also requested SAA to furnish us with their policy on the appointment of external auditors, so that we can be able then to evaluate whether then have this adhered to their own internal policy on the appointment of external auditors. And then SAA responded to our request for information, and what they submitted is an undated letter submitted to us by the company secretary. And the letter was explaining the appointment of Nkonki as the sole auditors of SAA. And Chair, we've attached, the copy of that letter is attached to this affidavit as Annexure PS 16. They also submitted to us an excerpt of the draft minutes of the continuation of the SAA Board of Directors meeting. I think the meeting number is number 2015/04. That was held on Friday, 10 July 2015. And the copy of that resolution, Chair, is also attached as Annexure PS 17. They also submitted to us, Chairperson, the SAA policy on supply chain management. Remember I said we requested the policy on the appointment of external auditors, but they only submitted their SAA supply chain management policy. So, Chair, upon then receiving this information, we evaluated the information that was submitted to us, but we could not confirm whether or not the appointment of Nkonki complied then with the supply chain management policy, because after requesting the policy on external auditors, appointment of external auditors were finished with the supply chain management policy. So then our evaluation then, instead of us evaluating with the policy on appointment of external auditors, we ended up evaluating then that on the appointment in terms of their own SCM policy. I must specify, Chair, that this was not an audit. It was just a high-level inspection of whether maybe then was the appointment then in adherence to their own policy or not. And we requested then SAA, because we couldn't see how the SAA has complied with that, with its own SCM policy or supply chain management policy. Then we
Just 1 second. The document they didn't give you, which you had asked for, was a document relating to the process to be followed in appointing external auditors. Is that what you said?
Yes, Chairperson.
You asked for that, they didn't give you that, but they gave you an SCM management policy.
Absolutely, Chair.
And bearing in mind why you would have wanted their policy relating to the appointment of external auditors, were you comfortable with proceeding with looking into this without the document that would have shown the process, their policies for appointing external auditors?
Chair, it became evident that SAA did not have a policy, a separate policy on the appointment of external auditors. Hence, they submitted the supply chain management policy to us.
Oh, it was because they did not have it.
They did not have it.
Oh, okay. Yes. But they should have had it. Or it's not obligatory.
It's not obligatory, but it's best practice.
Okay.
You know, because in some of the, I must say, because SAA was new to me.
Yes.
You know, when it came to me, because you remember that it moved from public enterprises to National Treasury. So it was new. One of the entities also was responsible for an example, that was also the same situation as SAA, was a Development Bank of South Africa, of Southern Africa. They had a policy on the appointment of external auditors. So when we're assessing their request to concur, they would furnish with us then their policy. And their policy then was quite detailed and also covered the requirements of how they appoint and also how they do the reappointment of the external auditors.
Okay, all right. Thank you. You may proceed.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, I think, as I said, that when then we evaluated then this sole appointment of Ngongi in terms of the supply chain management policy. But we didn't have, there's information then that we didn't have, where we requested SAA then to furnish us with evidence to confirm that Nkongi appointment complied with the supply chain management policy. You know, because when we looked in terms of the SCM policy, we looked at the resolutions that they gave us. We couldn't see how the appointment was done. And upon us making that request, Chairperson, SAA then furnished us with the board resolution number 2011/B24, dated 22 November 2011, in respect of the appointment of external auditors for the 2011-12 financial year. And a copy of that board resolution, Chair, is attached as Annex PS 18 to this affidavit.
I think I missed what you said in terms of what you asked SAA for when you couldn't see how they had complied with their supply chain management policy. I think you said you asked for something and I missed that.
Chair, upon us receiving the supply chain management policy, when we're looking at the supply chain management policy and also the information that they already furnished us with, we could not determine how SAA got to a decision of appointing SAA in terms of its own supply chain management policy. So then we said, please give us evidence. How did you comply with this policy when we were appointing
Oh, okay,
Kongi
yes.
as the sole auditor?
Yes, okay.
That is then when Chairperson then that gave us then that board resolution,
Okay, yes.
number 2011/B24
Yes.
of 22 November 2011. And the other information, Chair, that they gave us is SAA's Bid Adjudication Council's report dated 22 August 2011, recommending also the appointment of PwC for the 2011-12 financial year. And also this report is attached, Chairperson, as Annex PS 19. They also gave us, Chairperson, an extract of the in-committee minute of SAA's Audit and Risk Committee that was held on 24 August 2015 for the ratification of Ngongi as the external auditors of SAA. A copy of that extract, also, Chairperson, is attached as Annex PS 20. So they gave us, this is the information that they further gave us. They gave us when we requested. And when we received then that information, what we did was we performed an assessment of the documentation.
Before you proceed, am I right in understanding that they just supplied you with these documents without supplying you with any letter or statement from somebody at SAA saying, this is how we complied with our SCM policy, and what we are attaching are documents which support what we say in terms of how we complied?
Yes, Chairperson. Yeah,
Is my understanding correct?
I actually forgot to mention that was accompanied by the letter from the company secretary
Yes.
of SAA at the
Which
time.
specified how they had complied.
Absolutely, Chair.
Okay, and then the documents were attached as support documents.
Absolutely, Chair.
Okay, all right.
So, Chair, upon us receiving then this further information, and this information revealed to us that SAA did not have a separate policy for the appointment of external auditors. Therefore, our view as the Auditor General then was that the appointment of the external auditors had to be treated like any other supplier at the time. And also in terms of then the Bid Adjudication Council's report also of 22 August 2011, PwC had been recommended on condition that as SMME consortium plan has to be incorporated into the contract between SAA and the PricewaterhouseCoopers. Chair, the board resolution 2011/B24 of 22 November 2011, I'm sorry, Chair, about that, also confirmed that the resolution to appoint Konki and PwC as external auditors of SAA for the 2011-12 financial year jointly and on a 60-40 basis in favor of Nkonki incorporation. Chair, the excerpt also from the minutes of the board meeting of 10 July 2015 confirmed the appointment of Nkonki as external auditors of SAA for a period of five years. That's basically what it says. But the challenge that we had was that there was no evidence that SAA applied the principles of its own supply chain management principles. You know, so I think those are the challenges then that we had, and we held a view at the time, Chair, that the appointment of Konki as the sole auditors of SAA should follow a new procurement process. And the reason why we did that is because, Chair, in as much as they gave us the 2011-12 as an evidence that there was a procurement process, but that procurement process was a joint appointment. And at the time, we assumed then that, in as much as it was a joint appointment process, and also it was for 1 year, the subsequent years were like renewals of the contract. However, if then you come in the 5th year, and then the other entity in this joint relationship is taken out, to us, then it says then that it means then that it's an end of a relationship. So you need to start afresh and go and look for a new relationship. So that was the view, Chairperson, that we had.
And that view was based on the fact that the decision to appoint in 2011 related to 2 entities that were to act jointly.
Absolutely, Chair.
Now, what was being sought was to continue with one only.
Absolutely.
That was not the same as before.
Absolutely, Chair.
Because that could affect capacity as well,
Absolutely.
apart from anything else.
Absolutely, Chair.
Okay.
Mr. Sokombela, that seems to be one of the issues with the documents that were submitted to you. The fact that it was PwC, it sought the sole appointment of Nkonki when the original appointment was for joint auditors. Were you concerned, though, that the documents they submitted to you as proof of compliance with their SCM policy was effectively documents that showed an appointment for 1 year in 2011-2012?
In actual fact, I think in our deliberations internally, because I had to think back, 5 years ago, and I remember that in our deliberations, that is one of the issues that were concerned. However, like I said, I think before lunch, Chairperson, that the appointment of external auditors in terms of how we've been looking at it on our side as auditors was to say auditors, they get appointed, but also they can also get reappointed. But what was significant for us was then the relationship now with the joint audits that was stopped. But then we said if then the relationship with the joint auditors is stopped, it means then that maybe SAA then maybe needs to go and look, and follow a certain due process.
Now, are you able to remember whether there were other respects in which SAA had not complied with its supply chain management policy? other than the one you have mentioned? Or you can't remember?
I can't remember, Chair. And also, we're not involved with SAA. The only relationship we had was for them to be requesting concurrence
Yes,
to
yes,
us. Yes,
yes.
Chair. Yes.
So you're looking at these issues was not deep in terms of whether there had been compliance with procurement or with processes for the appointment of external auditors. Are you saying that you were not required to look deep into them? You were required just to have a look and see whether there seemed to have been a compliance without necessarily saying we are satisfied that definitely there was compliance.
Absolutely, Chair.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mr. Sokombela, did the AG then raise concerns regarding the appointment of Nkonki?
Chair, we did raise the concerns. However, we saw it now that us communicating through letters and emails is not going to work. And at the time, then I took it to myself then to go and have a meeting with the company secretary so that we can explain face to face in terms of what our concerns were. And the meeting was held on the 15th of September 2015, Chair. And after that meeting, I took it to myself to ensure then that I send them a recorder in terms of the concerns and also the recommendations then that are made. One of the things that I told them at the time was to say they need to reconsider the appointment, the process that they followed to appoint Nkonki as the sole auditors of SAA to ensure that there is compliance with its own supply chain management policy. And also once then they've actually relooked at that process, they are welcome to resubmit to us for our consideration. And also one of the recommendations that I made to them is to say, consider adopting a policy as SAA specifically for the appointment and reappointment of external auditors so that in future we don't have similar challenges. Then on the 14th of December 2015, then SAA submitted to us the documents where they submitted an excerpt of the draft minutes of the board meeting. I think the draft minutes is number 2015/07. That they held that meeting on the 9th of December 2015, where they were confirming the reappointment of PwC and Nkonki for the financial year 2015-16. Chair, the appointment was made on the basis of a 50-50 split, workload split, and subject to the concurrence of the Auditor General of South Africa in terms of Section 25, subparagraph 2 of the Public Audit Act.
Can I just pause you there? Sorry, Mr. Sokombela. Yeah. Do I understand correctly that what SAA is doing here is seeking to comply with your indication that their attempt to appoint Nkonki on a sole basis would not be concurred with by the Auditor General?
Absolutely.
And so they sought to comply with that by passing a new resolution to jointly appoint PwC and Nkonki.
That would be my assumption, Chair. That would be my assumption.
Let's go back to your meeting on the 15th of September 2015 with the company secretary. One, who was the company secretary? Two, what was his or her reaction to your concerns?
Chair, the name of the company secretary was Ms. Ruth Kipuka. She understood.
Kipuka would be K-I-B-U-K-A?
It's U-U-W.
Or K-I-B-W-K-A?
U-U, yeah, not W. just for the transcribers, Chair.
Okay, just to make sure you.
I can't remember the spelling, Chair.
You can't remember the spelling. Okay, no, that's fine. I think Mr. Mbikiwa sees it. Yeah.
Yes, indeed, Chair. I do.
Yes.
In fact, Chair, it's quite an important letter, email from Mr. Sokombela following up from his meeting with Ms. Kibuka.
Yes.
Perhaps we could go to it.
Yeah, we could go to that because I want to have a full picture of that discussion.
Chair, it's in DD 20B at page 532.
Okay. Thank you. And it may be important that even if he doesn't read the whole letter, he highlights the important features of the letter.
Indeed.
In terms of, insofar as it sought to record the discussion.
Indeed, Chair. Mr. Sokombela's recollection of it has been remarkably good, but I will ask him to just identify the key aspects of it.
Thank you, Chair. The key aspects, Chair, on the letter is I think it's an email, Chairperson.
It's an email.
It was not a formal, but I
yes.
thought at the time it's important that I reduce these our conversations with her so that she can confirm if I was accurate or was not accurate in my assessment of our meeting. But the key issue.
If you like, the one that you already mentioned, you don't have to repeat. You can just highlight others that you might not have mentioned. I understand you to have mentioned the one about your concerns about Nkonki going alone, that they may have to do that, plus your concern that they must consider having a policy for the appointment of external auditors. So if there's something else other than those that constitutes important features, then you can just add that.
Mr. Sokombela, the third bullet point is one that you haven't dealt with yet.
Thank you, Chair. The third bullet point in that email, Chair, if I may read it, it says the board resolution for the meeting held on the 10th July 2015 seek to appoint Nkonki for a period of 5 years in contravention of Section 25(4) of the Public Audit Act of 2004. The external auditors can be appointed for a period longer than 1 year on condition that it is stipulated in the contract that concurrence will be sought annually from the AGSA, or the Auditor General of South Africa. And yes, I think that is the only section that I didn't mention, Chair.
Yes. In terms of what the Company Secretary's reaction to these concerns was, then tell me about that at the meeting. What was she amenable? Was there resistance? Or she was going to reflect and then you come back to you in due course?
Chair, when we got there, I had to explain the rationale, because I think when we got there, I think in their mind it was they were driving the transformational agenda, by appointing a black firm, of which at the time also I did tell them as well that no, it's fine. We share the same sentiments. However, when you're seeking to do that, you got to ensure then that you follow the due process, and then the appointment as well is done in terms of your policies and procedures, and also the issue of for them to say they are utilizing the 2011 procurement process was it. I explained.
It was not in order.
It was not in order. However, after I explained, they understood as well, and they promised that they're going to take the matters back to the board for reconsideration.
Thank you, Chair. There is a response from Ms. Kibuka in the same file at page 558. It's a very brief and cursory response.
We may well deal with it for the sake of completing
Indeed.
everything connected with that meeting.
Yes.
558.
558.
You said. Yeah.
Mr. Sokombela, it's quite a short email. Would you just mind reading that into the record?
Thank you, Chair. The email from Ms. Ruth Kibuka reads as follows: Dear Polani, thank you for the meeting this afternoon and for the valuable input you have provided in respect of the appointment of our external auditors. We will review our process in cognizance of the concerns raised and revert as soon as possible. Regards, Ruth Kibuka.
Thank you.
If we can return to your affidavit at page 23, that's in DD 20A. And you had told us that the new board resolution had been submitted to the AG. Can you tell us what view then the AG took?
Well, let's first let's first deal with the content of whatever he received to see whether it, in his view, sufficiently addressed his concerns.
Thank you, Chair.
I take it that what you were telling me about, starting from the bottom of page 22, what you were sent there would talk to what the board had decided to do in order to address your concerns.
Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, so that's what I want to hear. They sent you something, you looked at it, you were happy that it addressed the concerns, or you were still not happy? That's what I'm looking for.
Thank you very much, Chair. Chair, on the 14th of December 2015, what then SAA sent us was then the excerpt of the draft minutes of the board meeting. The number of those draft minutes is number 2015/2017, held on 9 December 2015. Chair, in that excerpt of the draft minutes, what then SAA recorded as a resolution is the reappointment of PwC in Konki Incorporation on a 50-50 workload split and subject to the concurrence of the Auditor General of South Africa. And also accompanied that, Chair, is a letter that by the company secretary, that the letter was dated 11 December 2015, where then that letter is informing the Auditor General of South Africa of the board's resolution to reappoint PwC and Konki as joint auditors for the 2015-16 financial year. That letter, Chairperson, was accompanied by the consultation checklist, and a copy of that of the letter is attached as Annexure PS 23. The consultation checklist, Chairperson, is a checklist that is in our audit directive, where the entities needs to fill it and sign it so that they can send it to us to see if they complied with the appointment process.
So that checklist is different from the checklist we dealt with earlier. That is sent to the AG's office at the end of the auditing process.
The checklist that we dealt with earlier, Chairperson, is a checklist that the external auditors, when they signed the audit report, after they signed the audit report or they finish the audit report, the audit partner would sign, will fill it in and send it to us. We have not dealt then with the checklist that the entities have that needs to fill it in. However, with your indulgence, Chair, maybe we can go to the audit directive so that maybe I can demonstrate in terms of how the checklist looks like.
Well, at this stage, I just wanted to confirm that the checklist that you were referring to say they sent it to you, is different from the checklist that we discussed earlier.
Yes, Chair.
Is that correct?
It's different, Chair.
Okay, all right. Then whether we go to the directive now or later, I leave that to
We can
Mr.
certainly go there now.
Yeah. Okay.
It's in the same file as your affidavit. It's at page 141.
It's Annexure E.
Indeed.
Annexure E.
Yes, I think so.
That's at page 166.
166.
Okay. Yes, thank
It's
you.
Annexure E to the directive.
Yes. Page 166.
Yes, Chair.
Is it the correct one?
Yes, Chair, it's the correct one. However, in the annexure itself, there's a section that deals with the initial appointment, and also there's a section that deals with the reappointment. The section that deals with the reappointment is on page 169.
Yes.
Indeed.
Yes, Chair. If you look at the checklist itself, there is a checklist. Is for the reappointment of the audit firm, and it reflects the information that needs to be supplied, that needs to be submitted via the email to section 4 at agsa.co.za. There's a checklist there, Chairperson, where the name of the audit firm, the address and contact details, engagement, the name of the engagement partner, the financial years previously audited are needed. There is also details of the audit committee's assessment of the effectiveness and efficiency of the performance of external auditors, including IRPA's review results. There is also details of significant disagreements between the external auditors and accounting authority or the board during the preceding financial year, if any. There is also details that we requested to indicate any matter that may influence a decision regarding the independence, objectivity, or perceived independence of the auditors. And we also need information there, Chair, that we need the name of the partner in charge for the audit of the last 5 years. We just wanted to know whether the audit partner was the same or it was different partners. And also in number 11, there, Chairperson, we need the name of the senior audit manager in charge of the audit for the last 5 years as well. On the next page, Chair, that's where we need information regarding the cost of audit and non-audit services provided by the audit firm during the last 3 years. Chair, you remember earlier on we talked about the issue of non-audit services. This is where then we also look whether maybe are these fees in comparison with the audit fees very high. That's where we do an assessment whether then they will be independent or not. So in essence, this is how then the checklist for the reappointment then of the auditors looks like.
And it's the audit firm that completes it.
No, Chair, is the
entity.
The entity, when the entity then is appointing the external auditors, they are required to fill in this checklist.
Oh, so the auditee
Yes.
supplies this checklist, and the auditors at the end of the auditing process, when they have signed their report, supply a different checklist to the Auditor General.
Absolutely, Chair.
Okay.
Thank you. If we can return to your affidavit, Mr. Sokombela, we were at page 23, and you had just told us that the company secretary had submitted this letter and informed the AG of the board resolution. Can you now tell us what view the AG took in response to receipt of that?
Thank you, Chair. Upon then receiving this this information, we assumed then that the board has rescinded their decision to appoint Nkonki as its sole auditors, as they now have appointed PwC and Nkonki as joint auditors. And we then said then, based then on our assessment, then in as much as the appointment process was done in 2011, however, then it's, there's nothing that has changed. We did not see any reasons on our side to object, not to concur with that. And then we recommended then that the Auditor General can concur with the appointment.
Thank you. And it was on that basis that PwC and Nkonki were then appointed as the joint auditors
Absolutely,
for the
Chair.
2015-2016
Absolutely, Chair.
financial year. I'd like now to get into the year that the AG took over the SAA audit.
Before that, are you able to tell me when exactly the Auditor General's office came to the conclusion that its understanding of what its obligations were in regard to extensions or renewals? Are you able to tell me when it was that the Auditor General's office changed its mind and said, no, actually, we are obliged, if it's renewals or extensions, to satisfy ourselves or to have a look, to do a high-level consideration,
Yes, Chair.
if that is what it is, of whether there's been compliance each year.
Absolutely, Chair. Chair, I think I had during the lunchtime I had a conversation with Advocate Marisa Bezedenhout, who is our corporate lawyer. You know, because I just wanted to find out this thing of the obligation, whether we were really obligated to look at whether they follow the supply chain management policy, or it was just a process on our side to say we're going to look at it. And what she advised me on that was that we were not obligated to look at whether then they complied with the supply chain management policy, in as much as in our audit directive we've actually put it there to say we're going to check. And I can't remember, Chair, which year we've decided to put it in our audit directive to say we're going to check it as part of the process. But I think it's somewhere around 2015, 2016, 2017. In 2017, definitely is there in the directive. But I think it's somewhere 2015, 2016 when we decided to say, as part of our processes, we're going to look at it.
Well, I'm more interested in your understanding as opposed to any understanding by your legal advisors. So I'm more interested in your understanding over the years. Whether the understanding was right or wrong is something as part to your own understanding. I understood you so far, and you are going to tell me if I misunderstood you. I understood you so far to say that your understanding, and I'm now talking about the Office of the Auditor General, for a certain number of years was that there was no obligation for you for there to be compliance every year, or for you to look deep into that, but that from a certain time you changed your view about that and started doing things differently. Is my understanding correct?
Absolutely, Chair.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And at this stage, you just remember that maybe 2015, during the 2015-2016 financial year, it may be that that's when the change happened.
Absolutely, Chair.
Okay, thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Sokombela, I'd like to move to the audit that the Auditor General did of SAA in the 2016-2017 year. Before we get to that, can you just briefly tell me your understanding of the audit from 2011 to 2012, sorry, 2011-2012 to 2015-2016? I'm talking about the financial years here. What was the overall audit opinion expressed by PwC and Nkonki over those years?
Chair, the audit opinion that was expressed by Nkonki and PwC in those years was unqualified audit opinion with no findings. The Auditor General normally refers to that as a clean audit opinion. Yes, so that is my understanding of the audit outcomes.
Thank you. Just for lay people, can you tell us what that means? What is a clean audit? What does an unqualified audit mean?
Yeah, maybe you should start with qualified and unqualified, because sometimes I think I understand it, but sometimes I think I confuse it, because I think when you say qualified to somebody looking at the English language, thinks that's a good thing. It's qualified. and if you say unqualified, it's like it's a bad thing. It's an unqualified teacher or something. so just make sure that I don't confuse them.
Yeah, it's understandable, Chair. It's quite funny when you're looking at it literally. But I think maybe if I may explain the audit opinions in terms of how they are. The auditing standards have got an audit opinion that is an unqualified audit opinion. What then that audit opinion, Chair, means is that the financial statements of that entity are free from material misstatements, whether caused by fraud or error. So it means then
it says they are good.
It says they are good, meaning that then the governance processes, there is no material issues that have been identified. So there's nothing that came to the auditor that can indicate that there was a problem. So that would be the
Unqualified.
an unqualified audit opinion.
So we lay people shouldn't place a lot of emphasis on unqualified.
Absolutely, Chair.
Okay,
Absolutely, Chair.
yeah. So the one that seems to be bad is actually the good one. Unqualified.
Yes, it's a good one, Chair. It's a good one.
Okay, right.
Yes.
And then the qualified, it's
Chair,
the opposite of that.
Yes, Chair, the qualified audit opinion is when, upon auditing the financial statements of a particular entity, we find out that we are, as auditors, we are happy with everything except for. In the except for, we will say we are happy with the financial statements except for assets. So that would be then a qualified audit opinion, because we are saying, yeah, your financial statements are good, but assets are not good.
Yes.
Then that is going to be then a qualified audit opinion.
Oh, so maybe the best thing is to start with the qualified one.
Yes.
To say, if you had no concerns at all, it would just be an opinion.
A good opinion.
Yeah, and if it's just an opinion, it's a good opinion. Because you have some concerns, you have to qualify your view of it.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And when you then say unqualified, you mean it's a good one without any hesitation.
Absolutely, Chair. Without
maybe without any hesitation is not accurate, but from an auditor's point of view, that's the best that any entity can get if it's unqualified.
Yes, Chair. And also I think us as auditors also are very careful also, because I think when I think the issue of absolute assurance,
Yeah.
it's a very it's a concept on our side that we always try to communicate that as
Yeah.
auditors, we're not providing absolute assurance.
certainty, yeah.
So what that means, Chairperson, even the unqualified audit opinion, in the opinion of the auditor, there are no material errors or material misstatements. There may be errors, but they may be below a certain threshold or below a certain materiality amount.
Yes, yes. So that it might not mean it's absolutely clean,
Absolutely,
but in the opinion of the auditor, it's materially fine.
absolutely, Chair.
Okay.
Absolutely.
And just to follow on from that, Chair, you say materially fine. You've mentioned, Mr. Sokombela, that it's free of material misstatement. Would that also mean that it's free of material findings as to, for example, non-compliance with the PFMA?
Chair, if I can get your indulgence in terms of, in the context of the Auditor General, in terms of then how then do we look into this? How then in the audit office we've looked into this was to say we're going to have categories of these opinions. In the unqualified category, we have two categories, Chair. We're going to have a category that will say the financial statements are unqualified with no material findings. And the reason why we're doing that, in terms of the Public Audit Act, the Auditor General is required to audit and express an opinion on the financial statements, on predetermined objectives or performance information, and also on compliance with legislation. So it becomes then a mandatory requirement then that we need to opine on those three areas. However, currently, we only express an opinion only on the financial statements. In terms of the audit of performance information, we only express an opinion in the management reports. We have not escalated expressing an opinion in the audit report. So what we do, we will have an opinion in the management report, but we will then take out significant findings that we've identified and escalate them to the audit report. So, with the compliance with legislation, we don't provide an opinion at all. We will just have material findings. And those material findings as well, we also escalate them to the auditor's report. So then you may find out then, the Chairperson, that you've got this audit opinion, it's unqualified, but it has got these significant findings that we've escalated to the auditor's report. So it makes then the audit also not to be good as well now, because in as much as your financial statements, you've prepared them properly, at some cases, because of the capacity issues in the public sector, what we experience as the Auditor General is the fact that we received financial statements as well that have got a lot of errors. So, and then we find that there's a lot of effort that is done for us to get them to be corrected. So what we normally do then, we escalate that effort to the audit report to say, in as much as your financial statements are okay, but when you gave us, they were not okay. So we will then give them a non-compliance to say, for example, the Public Finance Management Act or the Companies Act requires you to submit to us financial statements that are free of material misstatements. But when we were submitting them to us for audit, they had a lot of material errors and misstatements that we had to identify through our audit process. Then that audit then is not clean anymore. Yes. So that is I think I wanted to explain that, Chairperson, so that it can be understood.
I think that's important, yes.
Can you just remind me what was the audit opinion expressed by PwC and Nkonki over the 5 years that they audited?
It was in the clean category of these two, now, unqualified, but there were no material findings on performance information. There were no material findings on compliance with laws and regulations.
Thank you.
But though those two was the evidence you were giving just now, saying that that is what happens with the Auditor General's office as well when it does auditing, and that's what happens with most, maybe many auditing firms. In other words, it's not something unusual. Is that what you were seeking to suggest? If those two are not being looked into?
Chair, you mean the two, the unqualified with findings and unqualified with no findings?
I thought you said earlier on, in terms of the AG's office, and this might apply to private firms as well, you express opinions on the financial statements, but you don't express opinions on certain things.
Yes, Chair.
And I'm thinking that what you have just mentioned now that they didn't deal with was also the same things. Did I misunderstand? I think findings and something else that you said you don't express opinions on, but maybe you should be expressing opinions on.
Chair, what we should be expressing an opinion on is the financial statements, is the predetermined objectives of performance information, is compliance with legislation.
Yes.
But currently, we're only expressing an opinion on the financial statements.
Mm-hmm.
On the performance information of predetermined objectives, we're only expressing it in the management report, which is an internal document that we communicate only to management. So out of then that management report, we take out significant findings that we take them to the auditor's report. That is a public document that gets to be so. So in essence, we are not expressing an opinion both on performance information and compliance. It's only on financial statements that we express an opinion.
But in terms of the standards, professional standards, in terms of what is expected of either an auditor or the AG's office, are you supposed to do anything differently in terms of expressing an opinion on those? Or what you are doing is in accordance with what is expected, namely, you say you only express an opinion in the management reports and so on. I want to know whether you are saying, this is what is expected of us, but we know that right now we don't actually meet that standard.
Yes.
And there may be reasons for that.
Yes.
And or whether you are saying, no, we actually meet the standard. It's just that maybe we don't do A, B, C, D, but we are not expected to do that anyway.
Indeed, Chair. No, Chair, it's what we're doing is in terms of the auditing standards.
Okay.
Yes. I must say, Chair, the only difference between the audit that the Auditor General performs and the audit that the private sector firms, when they are auditing private entities, performs is the fact that our audit is governed by the Public Audit Act. And the Public Audit Act requires us to audit those three areas.
Okay.
But in the private sector, the requirement is just to audit financial statements only.
Okay,
Yes.
Thank you.
And did I understand correctly that although you don't express an audit opinion on the latter two, you do express material findings in the audit report on those?
Absolutely, Chair.
Thank you.
Absolutely, Chair.
If we can turn then to page 27 of your affidavit, can you tell us how it came about that the AG took over the SAA audit?
I'm sorry, before that, just want to make sure that I've misunderstood. You said that PwC and Konki, for those 5 years of auditing SAA, throughout gave a clean audit. Now I know that a clean one is the unqualified, unqualified one. That's what they did. You haven't yet dealt with the question of what the AG's response was to that. That's still coming. Is that right? Mr.
You mean
Bidu?
in those years?
Yeah, for the once they became aware in those years, yeah.
No, perhaps we should deal with that now.
Yeah.
How did the AG respond when each year, in its monitoring role, it was informed that SAA had obtained a clean
Was doing well.
Chair, the audit of South African Airways was performed by a reputable firm, a global firm, which is one of the big four firms in South Africa, by the name of PricewaterhouseCoopers, and also by a medium-sized firm by Nkonki. And as part of our concurrences, one of the things that I mentioned there is that we would receive an assessment that has been done by the audit committee in terms of the independence issues, the issues of fees, whether there is any big non-consulting fees, but most importantly, there are quality results from the independent regulatory board for auditors. Because as the Auditor General, we believe that if then the independent regulatory board for auditors, in its inspection of the firms, has not found anything that is suspicious of anything, we had no reason to question whether then the clean audit opinion that has been expressed is appropriate or not. So, yes, so that is basically then how we looked at it, we viewed at it at the time.
Of course, for the years prior to the 2015-2016 financial year, you were not involved.
Absolutely, Chair.
Other colleagues were involved.
Absolutely, Chair.
And then you got involved in the 2015-2016 financial year. Do you know whether whether PwC and Konki, during any one or more of those 5-year financial years, whether based on what was in the public domain, they should have picked up some things which they didn't pick up, and maybe if they had picked those things up, then they may have looked at those things and maybe the result would not have been clean audits. Is that something you have established? Is that something you have not established, you don't know about?
We never established that, Chairperson.
Yes, but did you look into it or not really?
When I got involved in 2015-16, for an example, I would just have high-level engagements with them in terms of what is happening and share, specifically, I think the areas of specialization in the Auditor General is the Audit of Compliance. For example, I will share with them, for an example, there's a guide from National Treasury on irregular expenditure in terms of how that needs to be dealt with. Those will be the documents that I will share with them to say, look, in terms of how then this is done. So yeah, so that would be the extent that we go into. One of the important issues, Chair, that maybe I must highlight is the fact that once us as the Auditor General we opt not to audit, it becomes then difficult to step in the toes of then those auditors, in the sense that when they sign the audit opinion, they sign it in their name. They become then the people then that takes accountability.
Yes.
For that specific assignment. Yes.
Yes. The Auditor General's office is not expected to exercise oversight over them, or is it expected to do so over the private law firms that audit public entities.
We will provide the oversight, Chair, but it's limited.
Yes.
It's a limited oversight in terms of, for an example, us, for example, attending audit committees with them. When, for example, they've got areas where they are struggling, they can ask us, we'll give them guidance. If you remember, Chair, Annexure D, then when Annexure D is completed by then the partner is then to give them feedback about that. We don't go to an extent of saying, let me select, for an example, let me go and review your work.
Yes, okay.
We don't go there
do that
because
out of respect for their professionalism.
Absolutely, it's out of
Yeah.
respect. For example, if they are
Yes.
telling us that there is no problem, we are fine.
Yes, yes.
For example,
yes.
you're saying in the media, they are saying this is what has happened.
Yeah,
They can say, no, we've looked at that, it's not an issue.
yes. And then
so
you can accept their
I can
word.
accept that because they are
Okay.
professionals.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Sokombela, you were about to tell us about the how it came about that the AG took over the SAA audit.
Chair, the Auditor General of South Africa did not initiate the takeover or the take back of SAA as an audit. The request for the takeover was done by the then Minister of Finance, Mr. Nhlanhla Nene. And he made that request for the Auditor General to take over the audit for the 2015-16 financial year. I must say, also mention that when after the SAA moved to the National Department, sorry, to National Treasury, we also had regular engagements with the shareholder. And by the name, there's a team there that was responsible for performing oversight to SAA as an entity. So then the minister made that request in for 2015-16 financial year. I say in my affidavit, it says from 2016-17. I don't know how we can correct that, but he actually requested for the 2015-16 financial year. And then following then that request, Chair.
Well, maybe let's just take care of that. Supplementary affidavit can be made, which you will sign to say you are correcting what appears here.
Thank you, Chair.
Yes, okay. So you say he made the request in respect of the 2015-2016 financial year.
Absolutely, Chair.
Yeah, and do you remember how early in the financial year he made the request? Was it before or was it after PwC and Konki had been appointed?
It was after we received the letter,
The request?
the request for the sole appointment of Ngongi.
Oh, okay.
I think the officials of National Treasury, I think upon them exercising their oversight, they became aware of this appointment of Ngongi.
Yes.
And also, I think if I remember well, they were not in favor of that. And we received then that request then from the then minister to say instead then the audit should be taken back should be done by the Auditor General of South Africa. Chair, upon us then receiving then that request from the then Minister of Finance, we performed a risk assessment process, to say, okay, then there's this request now that we need to consider doing the audit of SAA.
This was still before the reappointment of both Konki and PwC for 2015-2016.
It was in that process.
It was during that process.
Okay. We received this request, I think, if I remember well, after, because the initial request came on I think on 24th of July 2015, but subsequent to that, I don't have the recollection
dates,
of the exact dates, but I think September.
Mm-hmm.
That's when then the then minister then wrote to the Auditor General.
Okay.
For the Auditor General to take back then the audit. And then us then as a team, upon receiving that request, we conducted a risk assessment to determine if are we ready to take this audit back now. There were 5 considerations, things that we looked into. The first one being the professional and legal requirements associated with the audit of South African Airways. The second one being the skills and the resources required to conduct the audit engagement. The third one being the quality assurance measures that will be suitable for the extent and complexity of the audit of the size of SAA. And also the degree of our access to PwC as well as Nkonki as the predecessor auditors, and as well as also then the independence and ethical requirements then that we had to look into. And Chair, once then the AGSA, once we've completed then that risk assessment, the Auditor General did what he did was to say for the 2015-16 financial year, will not be able to take back the audit. However, may reconsider taking it back for the 2016-17 financial year. So that is my recollection of that particular process in terms of then what happened. Hence, then we continued to concur for the reappointment of PwC and Nkonki financial year. Sorry, for Nkonki audit. Then, Chair, if I fast forward then to 2016 financial year, then I think the minister at the time was no longer the Mr. Ntlandanene. I think it was Minister Godan, if I'm not mistaken. At the time then...
yes, you are right. Minister Nene had been dropped from cabinet in December, on the 9th of December 2015.
Absolutely, Chair.
And Minister Godan had been reappointed to the Ministry of Finance a few days after the 9th of December.
Absolutely, Chair.
Yes.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, then in the annual general meeting then of in 2016 of SAA, that's when then the board of SAA made a recommendation to the shareholder or the minister to appoint then the Auditor General as the external auditors of SAA for the 2016-17 financial year, which then the Auditor General accepted then that request, and that's how then we got to be involved and start auditing South African Airways.
Okay, but that request was not formally required, really, because if the AG wanted to do the auditing of SAA for the 2016-2017 financial year, all it needed was not to concur in the appointment of any external auditors. Is that right?
That is right, Chair.
Yes.
Even though I think the practice in the office is also not to necessarily push for that. We do allow entities, even in the annual general meetings, to
Yes.
reappoint us.
Yes, okay.
You know, yeah, we
okay.
do allow that.
Okay.
But in terms of
Strictly speaking, it's not necessary, but
absolutely,
for a good working relationship, it might be a good thing.
absolutely, Chair.
Okay.
Thank you. Mr. Sokombela, if we can pick it up on page 28, you say there that the Auditor General, Mr. Makwetu himself, took the decision and that he led the high-level engagements prior to the decision. Is that the normal practice for the Auditor General himself to do that?
Chair, the Auditor General normally does not do that. However, because of the magnitude and the risk associated with this assignment, the Auditor General took it upon himself to be personally involved in this decision.
And has he retained a personal involvement in the audit?
Absolutely, he's still very closely involved even now.
And you also say at paragraph 52 that the sign-off was delegated to the national leader of audit services. Is that common practice to delegate to someone that high up?
Chair, it was the first of its kind at the time, because normally the Auditor General normally delegates the audits to be signed off from the level that is just below the national leader, because the national leader needs to be busy with the audit strategy of the organization, so will not have time to be signing the audit reports. But at the time, the Auditor General deemed it fit that the seniority in the organization needs to be demonstrated as well, and that is how he took the assignment, the taking over of South African Airways as very, very important.
Mm. And another way in which you indicate that it was taken seriously was in terms of the resources put into the audit.
Absolutely.
Can you take us through the human, financial, and other resources that went into the 2017 audit?
Yes, Chair. You know, in that year, what happened was that there was a selection process that was made, in the sense that myself, then I was, before being involved in the audit of South African Airways, my role was that of a senior manager responsible for technical support. However, because of then, at the time of my involvement, then I was requested then to lead the engagement, and also to ensure then that myself and my colleagues then we select the audit professionals in the whole organization that are very good, are very sharp, that have demonstrated competency, especially in the space of state-owned entities. During that selection process, we ensured then that we need to get people that have got sufficient audit experience, people that have got technical know-how, especially in the application of the International Financial Reporting Standards. And also, the most important thing was people that demonstrated performance in terms of ensuring then that they can perform and can deliver the task. And after formulating then that team, we had a team then that was responsible for the regulatory side of the audit assignment, meaning that the audit of financial statements, the audit of compliance with legislation, the audit of performance information. And also we had the audit team that was responsible for the audit of information systems. Excuse me, at SAA, because SAA is a highly IT complicated business. So we needed to ensure then that we've got professionals then that are qualified with the know-how in terms of that. One of the other important thing also was to have people also that have got experience in risk assessments, especially for tenders, for big tenders, and that will be able then to give us insights, and also people that will be able to do data analytics and analyze complex contracts at SAA, because SAA has got very, very complex contracts. One other important issue to mention, Chair, was that the support from our technical department by the name of the Audit Research and Development was very important to ensure then that that team at all times, they get priority when then there are complex issues that are there. And one of the things that they did for us was to ensure then that they get the annual report of the prior year, they analyze the annual report, they identify areas where there might be risks that us as the audit team then we need to prioritize or be aware of and look into them. And also our legal services division in the Auditor General of South Africa was very, very closely involved to ensure then that they will offer advice on certain contracts and certain issues. So that was then the effort then that that was made for us then to ensure then that we take this assignment, we execute it to our best ability. Okay.
And can you describe for us the steps that you took in order to understand SAA's business?
Chair, the preparation of that audit on our side, we took it very, very seriously. And we ensured then that for us to perform this assignment successfully, we need to ensure then that we invest sufficient time and resources to it. And what we ensured then that we do was to ensure then that we engage the auditee in the name of SAA, and also we engage our previous auditors or predecessor auditors. And we had a lot of meetings, I think in December 2016, specifically at the level of the acting CEO at SAA, at the level of the then interim CFO at SAA. We had engagements with all the heads of departments. We requested a lot of information from your policy documents, governance documents, the minutes of the board, for us to ensure then that we assess, we evaluate in terms of then to understand the business of SAA. In January 2017, also we continued to ensure then that we learn in terms of how the business of SAA is wired, And one of the critical issues then that we ensured then that we need to do is to engage these stakeholders, is to have training and consultation as well. And one of the things, if you look at page 31 of the affidavit, Chairperson, from paragraph 60.1, is that what we did was to ensure then that when we get there, we need to get trained by an aviation expert, And we requested one of the big 4 audit firms, that have got experience globally, that audit airlines, to get us that expert. That expert then was based in London. So he flew to South Africa at the time, and he conducted training, and also he was available for consultations also throughout the audit process. One of the key topics that he covered at the time was the economics of the aviation industry, the profitability of the airlines, what are the challenges that are faced by the carriers, especially the ones in Africa, among others. We also had a lot of engagements with the PricewaterhouseCoopers as well as Nkonki Incorporation, with a view of gaining insights in terms of the risks areas that require attention. And also, I must mention that this is a requirement of the auditing standards as well, because when you come as a new auditor, it's incumbent then to you to actually ensure then that you engage with the predecessor auditor. The executive management team of SAA was very helpful, Chairperson, as well in terms of ensuring then that they were available when we needed them. And also, we requested them to do an induction for us, to induct us in terms of their business. What are they doing? Because it's easy to go to an airport and see and get into a plane and get into a destination, but We wanted to know the mechanics, that are involved in terms of them running the business. We wanted to understand their strategy in terms of what is it that they want to achieve as a business. What is their role in the South African economy? And also, we wanted to understand the subsidiaries, the divisions that South African Airways has. And the engagement team also, we conducted our own regular engagements, because as we go out to engage with all of these various stakeholders, we needed then to come back and reflect as a team in terms of, out of all this information that we are getting from these engagements, what are the risks? What can go wrong, in the business itself? So we call those engagement the risk assessment sessions, where then we deliberate. Everybody in the audit team will have an engagement then to contribute. The other conscious decision that we made was to say, perhaps let's get another private firm that has got an experience in auditing the aviation entities. And when we made then that decision, is because what we didn't want to do is to get into SAA and pretend that we know how that industry operates. And when we get there, we ensured then that the high risk areas in that industry, then the professionals from the firm itself then are going to be involved in terms of providing guidance to our teams, giving insights in terms of how certain areas needs to be dealt with. And if I can mention a few in terms of then these high risk areas is the issue of going concern, because SAA had significant or serious liquidity challenges at the time. And there is cash flow forecasts then that they do based on the passenger numbers and the revenue that they're going to make. And those assumptions can be quite complex. So we needed then to gain insights then from people then that have been there, that have looked into things. One other important component that for SAA is very complex is the airline revenue, the revenue from tickets. It's a very, very, very complex area to look into. There's also specialized components in the aviation industry where you don't find them in other entities that are not airlines. For an example, they've got a balance that is called maintenance reserves. And that balance is also very, very, very complicated, because there's a lot of assumptions that are made there to have that balance. And also, there's also another balance also that is called provision for lease liabilities. Because that balance also, because SAA has got a lot of aircrafts that they've leased out. And there are certain conditions then in those leases where then SAA needed to return the aircrafts in the conditions that they were delivered at. So then that creates a liability then for SAA to ensure then that they keep on maintaining the aircrafts over their useful lives as they are utilizing the aircraft. So there's a lot of assumptions that are made there. There's a lot of transactions, and these transactions can amount to billions of rands. So those were the very, very complex areas. Definitely the property, aircraft, and equipment also as a balance is a very complicated and specialized area. Chair, our internal quality control business unit also was very, very involved, because we didn't want the quality control to come only at the end of the audit process, but we wanted quality control to happen on a regular basis to ensure then that any non-compliance from our teams with the auditing standards is picked up early enough to ensure that we don't get into a risk of expressing an inappropriate audit opinion. And also what we did also, we looked for a private firm that has got a person that has got experience in aviation, also to do an external quality control assessment, control as well in the audit. We call that pre-issuance review. A pre-issuance review, what it means is that before the audit report is signed, that person needs to review the work and needs to say, I am happy with this audit opinion. So that is one of the critical areas then that we ensure then that we need to deal with. SIA also is a taxpayer in terms of them having to pay the personal income tax, the value-added tax, and the tax treatment of their transactions as well can be quite complicated. And we ensured then that we needed to get a tax specialist to actually be part of the team as well, so that they can be able then to provide us with insights in terms of then the tax matters at SAA. Chair, throughout the audit of South African Airways, I think it is worth noting that we engaged and communicated on a regular basis with all the governance structures, the audit committee, the chairperson of the board, the board members, the executive management team, to ensure then that everybody is kept abreast in terms of then how the audit process is happening. Chair, I think one of the things that I think I've highlighted in paragraph 61 of the affidavit is the issue of, this learning of the business and the operating environment at SAA. It came with a significant financial investment to the Auditor General of South Africa. When we're doing our budgeting in terms of then how much is going to cost us, we thought then this is going to cost us 5,500 hours. And I want to mention that these hours we said is going to be our investment time. What it means is that we're not going to claim it at SAA because we need to learn the business, and that learning curve, it needs to be, we're not going to bill it SAA. We said, okay, in our audit fees, we are prepared to write off 5,500 hours on an equivalent of 7 million rands. However, Chair, the actual number of investment hours that we ended up with were more than 14,000 hours. And we ended up writing off about 14 million rands in terms of the potential audit fees that we ought to have claimed at SAA, because we thought that it's important for us to invest quite a lot of time to have to understand the business. Chair.
And how big was, what was the number of the group that audited SAA from the AG's office? I'm just thinking about this very high number of hours, 14,000.
Chair, it was a big group.
Yes.
I used to joke when I talk to people that at SAA we had, including the contracted in resources, we would be about 70 people.
So it was quite.
It was quite
group, yes.
massive. It was a massive team. When we're having meetings, we'll have them in an auditorium.
Yes.
Mm.
Would the size would that big size of the group have been decided upon because of what? Because the AG's office might have realized there were huge problems. The opinions that had been expressed before, that everything was fine, were possibly very wrong. Was the size decided upon because there was a sense that there's a lot of trouble here, we need a lot of people? Or is that something you would not know because you didn't make the decision on the size?
Chair, the size was because of the size of the audit of SAA. Because SAA at the time was the biggest state-owned entity that we had, because they generated revenue in excess of 30 billion rands. So that was a big team. The issue of risks as well, Chairperson, yes, we did consider risk also when we're formulating the team. However, I think one of the big factors was the fact that SAA is a big company. So we needed to ensure then that we've got sufficient resources.
Okay, thank you.
How did this investment that you made in the SAA audit compare with other audits that the AG performs?
It was, Chair, it was a big investment. You know, it was a big investment in the sense that I think in other audits we do write off fees, but not to this magnitude. You know, so when I look into the investment time that we didn't claim at SAA vis-a-vis other auditees that have been involved with, this is the biggest. You know.
It occurs to me that something I didn't cover earlier in the context of the mandate and role of the AG is the way that the AG generates revenue. Do public entities pay fees to the Auditor General rather than the Auditor General be allocated funds?
Chair, there are independence issues that I think the laws, I think, have been made specifically for the Auditor General, because the Auditor General does not get an allocation or an equitable share. So how the Auditor General operates, its business model is that you need to have professionals that are going to bill the clients. You know, and that ensures our independence. You know, so when we audit, we also, like any other audit firm, table the budget with management, in the audit committees, and request them to approve, like any other person, and we have to justify why a certain audit fee needs to be paid, as opposed to us giving an allocation, because that would impair our independence. There may be unintended consequences for us as an audit office to be given an allocation.
Indeed. Thank you. I'd now like to turn to the substance of the audit in the 2017 financial year, and in particular the areas of concern that you identified. I'm aware I've skipped over the completion of the audit in your affidavit, but I think it makes sense to deal with that when we get to the end of it.
Yes, just before you proceed.
Indeed, Chair.
I think I had evidence sometime last year that one or more of the years from 2011 to 2016, 2015 may have been a year, or there may have been years when SAA failed to present their financial statements and so on for some time. Is that something that you remember?
Chair, what I can remember is that both the 2014-15 audit results and the 2015-16 audit results were only released in September 2016. Those two financial years.
And would that timing indicate that there may have been problems or not?
The challenge, Chair, at the time was SAA not being able to prove its going concern.
Yes,
whether it's a going concern.
That's where and that was during some of those years that
Absolutely.
we're talking about.
Absolutely.
Okay,
Chair.
because I seem to remember that at a certain time when Minister Nene was still the Minister of Finance, and I think it was during a time when there were issues about Airbuses and some deal, there was an issue between the board of SAA and the Ministry of Finance about the presentation of submission of financial statements. Yeah, okay.
Yes.
In fact, in 2017, there was a delay in the financial statements, wasn't there?
Absolutely, Chair.
You deal
There
with
was a
that
delay.
at paragraph 65. Would you like to explain that?
Absolutely, Chair.
Before you do that, let me ask this question. Would a delay in submitting financial statements on the part of a public entity like SAA be the kind of thing that would indicate to an auditing firm that there may be problems, or not necessarily? Would it be something to be flagged? Would it be something that attracts their attention to say, let's look deep into this?
Chair, it depends in terms of what it is that maybe is making the
delay, the reason for the delay.
Yeah, the risk for the delay. For an example, at SAA, one of the things that they couldn't be able to prove was whether they will be able to continue to operate.
Yes.
Excuse me,
yes.
because of money. Yes, they didn't have money.
Yes. But is that the kind of thing that would say to an auditor who is responsible for auditing that entity, when you audit this entity, you need to be really careful, look carefully before you issue an unqualified audit, or not really?
It will be one of the factors, Chairperson,
Yes,
to say we call it in auditing professional skepticism.
Yes.
You need to be
yes.
skeptical and ensure then that whatever was troubling the entity,
Yes.
before you sign the audit report,
Yeah.
if there is no issue, you are sure that there is no issue.
Yes. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. You were going to explain the delay in the financial statements specifically in 2017.
Chair, in 2017, it was the same issue, because I remember when we became the auditors of South African Airways, there was a problem with SAA not being able to pay its loans or its debt when it falls due. So there were lots of deliberations that the executive management team and the board were making with a consortium of banks at the time, because the financial situation at the time, it was very difficult for them. And the banks also were not willing to extend for a longer period of time. For example, they will extend it for 3 months and extend it for 3 months. And then the challenge then that SAA had is that if you extend me to pay you in 3 months' time, the financial reporting framework that I prepare financial statements using as SAA requires me to make a declaration in my financial statements that in the next 12 months, I will still be able to operate. So if I am not able to pay my creditors or the banks within the next 12 months, I cannot demonstrate that I will have the money, then the accounting framework then does not allow then for the financial statements to be prepared on a going concern basis. It would be maybe on a liquidation basis or whatever basis then that they need to be prepared with. So then that in 2017, Chair, then that became a big issue, because there was no funding that SAA can have, and the board was not comfortable at the time to submit financial statements to us for audit. For an example, in terms of the legislation, the public entity like SAA is required to submit financial statements for us to audit by 31st of May each year. However, in 2017, they couldn't submit the financial statements because they couldn't prove going concern at all. And they had to obtain a formal commitment from the shareholder, which is South African government, whether then the shareholder will be able then to inject further equity into the business. Yeah, so I think that was the challenge, Chair, that they had. Even though they ended up giving us, I think, financial statements by 31st of October 2017, because there were a couple of, there were funds then that the shareholder at the time, National Treasury, gave to SAA, and that they were able then to prove going concern. Then they submitted to us, and then we ended up signing the financial statements on the 8th of December, 2017.
Thank you.
That difficulty that SAA struggled with, which you have just told me about in 2017, about its financial statements, not being able to prove that for the next 12 months they'll be able to pay creditors. I get the impression that that's a very serious situation that any company can find itself in, any entity can find itself in. Is it possible that an auditor who had been auditing such a company for the previous 4 years or so could issue a clean audit for each one of those previous years without having picked up any problem that shows that in due course there's going to be this problem? Or is it possible that they may pick such a problem up, but it would not be the time for them to say there's a problem, because maybe the problem will manifest itself in another financial year? But I would have thought that when you audit this year, you are supposed to alert management to what problems may arise in the financial year, in the next financial year as well, if possible. I know that you said auditors audit history, but are you able to assist me? If you ask me on law, I will tell you that if a certain problem in a case arises on the last day of the trial, I might be able to tell you that that problem should have been picked up much earlier. So is this not possible in auditing?
Chair, I know that I said we audit history, and the issue of going concern is one of the exceptions to that, because if you find out that the entity has got liquidity problems, they may be able to convince you as an auditor that, within 12 months, we can still survive. But there may be a lot of uncertainties in that process as an auditor. That's why then an auditor then, the auditing standards, especially that deals with going concern, because the specific auditing standard that deals with going concern, give then an auditor then an option to highlight the uncertainty in the audit report, to say, in as much as this entity is saying that they are a going concern, I'm highlighting to you that there are these uncertainties that are there. And the reason for that, Chairperson, is that there are many people that use these financial statements. And the audit report is the one that most people that are using financial statements, they always go and read. And it's important then that for you as an auditor, then you highlight those challenges, so that when then people are making decisions based on those financial statements, they know then that the auditor has highlighted those specific issues.
And actually, when you audit an entity, is in the position that part of the usefulness of your report is that other people who may do business with this entity may look at that report or look at to see whether this is a financially viable entity to do business with. Is that right?
Absolutely, Chair.
So therefore, when any auditor audits, it's one of the critical things to do to see whether what they say about the financial health of this entity is accurate,
Absolutely, Chair.
because they know other people and other businesses may rely on this report to do business with them for the next 12 months or whatever.
Absolutely, Chair.
Okay. thank you.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Is there, just to pick up on that, Chair, is there other reliance that is placed on audit reports other than by other businesses?
There's a lot of various users of reports, Chair. If it's a public entity, from the shareholder of that public entity, because we'll rely on the audit report to see if governance issues, if maybe the board is running the entity properly. Parliament, especially then the oversight, like your portfolio committees in Parliament would rely on that audit report. Creditors, you know, or the suppliers of the business, because for them to see that their monies are safe, also they need to see in terms of how the audit report looks like. The employees also of the entity, because also they want to see their prospects, whether then their salaries are still going to be paid or not. So there's a whole host of different users with different objectives and different agendas that they would want to utilize the audit report for.
And, well, from what you are saying, it seems to me that, therefore, any auditor auditing an entity would pay particular attention to the question of the going concern status of the entity going forward for the next whatever, maybe 12 months or whatever period. Is that correct?
Chair, that is correct, because we even have an auditing standard that deal with going concern.
Yes.
So that then demonstrates the seriousness of evaluating going concern as an auditor.
Yes. Now, against that background, or maybe I should ask the question, had PwC and Konki in their audit reports of 2011, 2012, financial year 2012, 2013, 2013, 2014, 2014, 2015, and even 2015, 2016, had they indicated anything that showed that there may be problems, there could be problems of on the status of SAA as a going concern, or had they not?
Chair, based on my inspections of the report, I have not seen any of those in their audit reports.
Yes.
Yes.
And I know I may be going much ahead of you, but maybe for completeness, it's important to deal with it now. Having looked at what PwC and Konki had done, did you form any opinion whether how it came about that they didn't flag this issue? How they could have missed it? Is that something you were able to establish, to say, well, maybe it's inexplicable how they didn't pick it up. Any auditor worth his or her salt would have picked this up. Or, you know, it was a little tricky, it's complicated, you know, it's understandable if some auditor didn't pick it up. Or you might say, no, but really, these were very experienced auditors. This is a big auditing firm, PwC. Conk is a medium firm, as you said. There is no way they were not aware of this. So if they didn't flag it or say anything, it must be pointing to something else.
Chair,
I know I may be putting you in
yeah.
in a difficult position, but I want to try and understand because one of the things that we are trying to do is what happened? Why were certain things not picked up for SAA to be where it ended up being? And in terms of state capture, who played what role? And did everybody do their part the way they should have done?
Chair, on my side, I wouldn't like to speculate in terms of what were the circumstances that the previous auditors were faced with, or they had to evaluate at the time. However, if the circumstances were the same as our own circumstances when we took back SAA audit, yeah, it would be surprising why they wouldn't have highlighted that. However, I think the most important thing, Chair, is that I'm very careful to say I'm gonna go to the period that I was not involved, because there may be specific considerations or certain considerations that they may have made that made them not to highlight the issue of going concern.
Yes. No, I think you have put it quite carefully, and I think so. You say if they were faced with the same circumstances that you were faced with, looking at SAA, you would be surprised why they didn't pick it. You don't know if they were faced with the same circumstances. Can I then put this? But being an auditor of many years' experience, have you got any reason to think their circumstances may have been different in terms of what an auditor needs to have in order to pick up certain things? Is there something that you think might have been different? I know you are. I'm not asking you to be definite.
Yes. Chair, maybe what I can say is that when we took SAA, the audit of SAA, there were loans that were extended to end of December 2016.
Yes.
And SAA didn't have money to pay them.
Yes.
The audit reports were signed on September 2016.
Yes.
Then that is October, November, December. That is 3 months after the audit report has been signed.
Yes.
You know, so I don't know whether maybe when the audit report was signed, whether they had sight of those challenges or not.
Yes.
However, when we came, we were inundated with those troubles.
Yes.
You know, where SAA could not demonstrate the ability to pay the loans from the banks.
Yes. Okay, thank you.
Chair, that might be an appropriate moment at which to adjourn. I see it's 4:00.
Yes. How much time do we need to finish with him?
Chair, I would think probably an hour and a half, perhaps.
Okay. And the other witness for tomorrow is likely to take how long?
The remainder of the day, Chair, but we're relatively confident we can complete with some hesitation.
You must know that you are on your own on making any undertaking.
I checked first, Chair. I checked first.
Okay. Maybe that's fine. Should we start a little early tomorrow, or should we stick to normal time?
Chair, perhaps we could start at 9:30, if that would be convenient.
But your feeling is that maybe even 10 might be fine.
Even 10 might be fine, indeed.
Okay, can we leave it at 10 on the understanding that if I change my mind and advise you in the course of this evening, you might be able just to advise the witnesses to be here a little earlier?
Certainly, Chair.
Okay, all right. Okay, we are going to adjourn now. We will resume tomorrow at 10 o'clock unless everybody is advised differently before 9 tomorrow. We adjourn.
All rise.